How's everybody doing? This is Jermaine with the Wealth and Wellness Podcast. This is episode number 2. And honestly, I had someone else in mind, but we are going to do this episode regardless because we have a lot to discuss. A whole lot has been happening in the last couple of weeks, number of weeks, and I want those things to be highlighted at least on this episode. First things first, the P. Diddy documentary. Okay, I looked at it. Let's go back just a little bit. I honestly didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the court case. I did not pay a whole lot of attention to the court case. I honestly was ignoring it. I honestly wasn't very interested in the drama of it all. I wasn't very interested in what he was being charged with and getting the details and the scoop and so on and so forth. I will say this. When I first started to hear about the charges that were being brought against him, I was very disappointed and disoriented. And where that is coming from is my feelings about the hip hop industry as a whole. I feel like what it has basically become is an opportunity to grab talent from underserved and disenfranchised communities, and without any therapy, without any coaching, without any help about their personal lives, their thoughts, their feelings, their dilemmas, their traumas, they are thrust into the spotlight and they are making millions, not only for themselves, but particularly for the execs, right? The record executives. Then, as time goes on, life starts to fall apart because they are not being raised, they're not being cultured, they're not being groomed to become not only stars, but people who can handle the stardom, handle the money, handle the new lifestyle. They are simply being put in front of thousands of people because they have the desire, the passion, and the talent. Then real life creeps up from behind and starts to highlight the things that they struggle with, the things that they don't understand, the things that they never heard of, the things that they've never been taught, and they start to make huge mistakes. When they start making these huge mistakes, the industry abandons them and leaves them out to dry and go, hey, you said you wanted this, didn't you? I think about this when it comes to Nicki Minaj and some of her struggles that she's had. I think about this when it comes to DMX and the struggles that he's had. I think about this when it comes to the Tupacs and the Biggies and the other people who have either died or went to jail after getting a record deal. I think about this, and these are the things that made me go, I honestly don't want to see another person thrust into the spotlight have such a terrible fall after having become famous. So, with that being said, when I started to watch this documentary, I was very displeased. I was very frustrated. I was very heartbroken by the things I was starting to witness. I honestly didn't even really want to talk about it once I first started watching it because, again, I don't want to be caught up in all of the drama. However, the more that I saw, the more that I heard, the testimonies, the interviews, right, the confessions about Tupac's death and Tupac's murder, it started to make me get more and more upset, not just with Puff Daddy, but again, the what I want to say is the industry. I want to say the industry, but I also am honestly having a huge wrestling match with power itself. I mention power because I recognize that as much as I don't like the money that he had, and as much as I don't like the things that he did, I recognize that power has a certain power over the people that not only have it, but are associated with the people who do have it. I have been around powerful people in various forms and fashions, and I personally have struggled with being around powerful people for various reasons. And these are some of them, right? These are some of them. Them recognizing that they have the power to make certain decisions and people won't question it. The people that follow them have a certain, if you will, mesmerized or hypnotized way by which they view this person, and therefore they aren't particularly critical. They aren't particularly aware of what they are doing and what they're not doing. They are just focused on their relationship with this person who is in power or who has power, and they are trying their best to appreciate and to continue to promote the person who is in power. All that to say is I could not and I did not undermine the people who were around him who didn't hold him accountable, but I also didn't fail to empathize with those people when I recognize when you're put in a situation where a friend of yours, a colleague of yours, an associate of yours is doing big things and they draw you into their circle, how you can feel very, what is the word, right? You can feel very confused as to what it is that you want to do because your destiny, your experience, your life, your income is tied up in their ability to rise and continue to gain more power. Therefore, it is more difficult for you to say, hey, I don't like this. I want to jump ship. All that to say, I am more grateful for the Maces, the J Lo's, right, the Loons, the Locks, right, the people who got connected with Puff Daddy and Bad Boy Records and slowly moved and said, I do not want to be connected with all of this as much as it is directly connected to my career and my finances and my income and my opportunities. I do not want to stay connected to this individual and this label because I see how much drama and how much heartbreak and how much violence is coming out of being connected to this particular brand. It also makes me think about the Master P's, right? Makes me think about Snoop Dogg going to No Limit Records after leaving Death Row because of their relationship with violence and the criminal lifestyle, right? And so I also drawn to the fact that we don't very often talk about great leaders and good leaders until we see some things that are going wrong. We really just go, they're supposed to be good leaders, and so we're just glad that they're being good leaders. But there is a point where we need to celebrate good leaders that much more because we recognize that they could be using their power to hurt people. They could be using their power to sexually abuse people. They could be using their power to economically harm people, but they're intentionally and deliberately managing their power well so that they can actually have a good impact, not just for the masses, but for the people who are immediately in their surroundings. So this was a very difficult thing to watch, especially being from the West Coast, having a very long history and relationship with Tupac's music, Tupac's life, Tupac's mother, and her relationship to Oakland and the Black Panther Party, right? All of that. I have read her book, right? I have read his books. I've listened to his albums. I actually started listening to Tupac back when there was Brenda's Got a Baby. I was listening to Tupac back when there was Holla If You Hear Me. This is way before, right? I was super excited about Tupac. I loved Holla If You Hear Me. I am not exactly sure what my 10 or 9 or 8-year-old mind was so excited about, but I was also very interested in Brenda's Got a Baby. I love the sadness of the song. I love the difficulty of the subject matter. Honestly, I don't even think there was 2, 3 verses. I think there was just 2, maybe 1. But at the end of the day, it was a great song. All that to say is to hear that Puff Daddy is directly connected to the demise of Tupac and the money that was supposed to be paid to Keefe D. All of that is super hard to just watch and absorb because he meant a whole lot and his death meant a whole lot, not just to fans. Okay, we watched the Tupac documentary a few years ago that was produced, and it was a 4-part miniseries, and it talked about his life and his impact and his influences and his influence on other people and what he was trying to accomplish before getting into gangster rap. You think about how traumatized his life was, not just because of the violence that was around him, but particularly when he was shot in New York. That changed the trajectory of his career. He knew at that point that he was going to be a gangster rapper. He was going to do a lot of damage to Bad Boy. He was going to talk a lot of smack on a lot of songs. And that energy could have been invested into other places, into other songs, into other forms of media, and it wasn't. And not only did it lead to his demise, but it also led to the demise of Biggie Smalls, who also had some great songs that I loved and appreciated. And so to see all of this kind of unfold in this terrible manner, it just really speaks to how we are, as a Black community, drawn in with opportunities of economic gain to, by some means, harm ourselves and others. And other people get to stand back and go, we didn't have nothing to do with that. When really we know that there was a lot of money, there was a lot of cooperation, there was a lot of people who had given Puff Daddy opportunities, partnered with Puff Daddy, and so on and so forth, and did not say, you have to check these things because we don't stand for those things. They simply become the matters that he has to deal with and own, and they can make money off of him and go on about their business and possibly invest into another artist or another producer or another executive and just move on from this opportunity. So that is what I struggle with. One of the things, and some of the things I struggle with watching this documentary. I hate the fall of different artists. I hate the demise of different artists. As an artist at heart, I understand, and that therefore empathize with the men and the women who went for the opportunity and said, I might actually endure some of these negative consequences because I am that committed and that interested in my career being successful. That being said, I know that there's a lot of different feelings about, honestly, about Cassie, right? And how Cassie could have managed the situation, how she could have moved. While I appreciate what J-Lo did in leaving and Mace and leaving, I also empathize with the folks who managed to figure out or found themselves sticking around for a very long time and not just a short period of time because they were connected to this powerful source. And this powerful source knew that they had power and they used that in various forms and fashions. And so I definitely do empathize with the folks who joined the Making the Band videos and joined those competitions and those challenges and who ended up making songs and albums and so on and so forth with him after all kinds of drama, because I know what it's like to feel like you want something to happen and you've met somebody who sees something in you and you see something in them, and then this can possibly become, if I can just be quiet, if I can just handle this a little bit longer, so on and so forth. I get that. Now, I don't want to be someone who endures a whole lot of that, but I definitely do understand the people who go, I'm lightweight willing to, because I do want my career to excel that much. And that is not something that we just see in the music business, but we also see that in the entertainment business as it pertains to the actors, as it pertains to athletes, as it pertains to people who get connected with certain coaches, certain programs, certain directors, and they say, man, I can do a whole lot for you, but in order for me to take you serious, I'm going to need some favors. Right. And we see it happen, whether we're talking about documentaries on Netflix or not. We see it happen all the time where people get themselves involved into certain careers because somebody powerful drew them in and they got a whole lot more out of the deal than they would have if they weren't so powerful and they didn't have this much influence over these particular individuals. And so, again, it's a whole lot to take in. I encourage folks to watch it. I encourage folks to pick it apart. I encourage folks to criticize it. I've been looking at a lot of different interviews on like the Breakfast Club and getting some um, some feedback about what they've seen and what they didn't like and what they don't agree with and what they don't believe happened and what they thought was real. And more than I want to fight about it and have debates with people, I want people to at least understand that one, at least some of this happened. Two, that these are people at the end of the day, and they deserve to be heard, understood, empathized with, and so on and so forth. So that will complete my spiel on that. But that draws my attention to what I recognize or what I started to see in the news, what happened in Stockton, right? A birthday party was shot up a number of days ago, and there was about 4 deaths, and some of those, the majority of those were children. There was 3 deaths that were children. I think one was a young adult or a teenager. And then you had a number of people that were shot. I think about 11 people that were shot and injured. And all of that is just bringing up this feeling, this understanding about our relationship to our environment and what we are connected to, what we do, what we don't do, and how that can impact the people that we are directly connected to, right? And so what's starting to come out is that the person that was getting, one of the persons that was putting on the birthday party was a rap artist, and he had beef with other people, and this beef is not new. And so what we're starting to recognize is that this beef had followed him to that party, possibly because there are still things that still have to be figured out, possibly followed him to that party and meant that he wasn't safe there, and nor was anyone else there. Now, this is not to say that the people who shot up the party, by some means, it made sense that they did what they did. But it does mean that these are some of the things that not only do people talk about in songs, right? But this is something that does happen, right? People will shoot up a house that a person is staying in, regardless of who's at the house, probably because there's more people at the house to have more of an impact and send a bigger message, right? So we recognize that when people get violent, they intentionally do crazy and terrible things at times on purpose because they want that type of impact. They want it to be understood that they can and are willing to go that far to prove a point, to get revenge, whatever that may be. All that to say is that this is an incredibly sad event, incredibly traumatizing for the children and for the adults, but it also speaks to our need to make big changes in our lives, to change our environments, change our circles, whatever we have to do in order to actually be safe when we are out with our family and our friends. In order for our friends and our families to be safe, we have to all be on one accord in terms of what we're doing and what we're about, because we don't want to find ourselves or the people around us in danger because of the types of things that we're up to, the types of places that we go, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to speak to that because I know that it's incredibly sad. I heard Burna Boy is helping with covering the funeral costs of all the people that passed away, and that's super dope. And recognizing that some people didn't like that or have issues with that, and I'm just recognizing that again, there's a lot of feelings, and there's reasons to have many feelings about the things that are occurring and have occurred around this particular shooting. It's honestly called a mass shooting because so many people were shot at. They are thinking it could have been more than one person that started shooting, and they're thinking that this would be one of those cases in which it's actually classified as a mass shooting because someone came to shoot up a number of people and not just one person in particular. And that's super crazy to talk about when we're talking about this inner city violence, because a lot of inner city violence is usually between gang members, it's between individuals. It's not usually someone coming into a venue and shooting up anyone and everyone that they possibly can hit. Super sad, super sad, super sad. And so, a couple more things that I want to just bring up. One is I have been unemployed for about 2 months now, about 2 months, maybe 2.5 months at this point. And I started by first mentioning it on Facebook, because I recognize that there is a desire for me to keep it under wraps because I want to act like everything is fine. No, nothing more, nothing less. I just want to act like everything is fine. However, I've been unemployed before and it was longer than I expected to be. And I recognized that I was going through all of the feelings, the thoughts, and emotions around it all alone because I wasn't telling anybody about how this was or that this was even happening. Right. And so as time goes on, I'm starting to have all of these mental battles around it. Thoughts come in and out of my mind about my worth, of my value, my talent, my understanding, my education, my lack of this, my lack of that, what I don't have, what I don't know, what I don't understand, what I haven't been trained on, what I haven't been taught. All these things are coming up and they're causing many feelings and thoughts, right? And this is on a daily basis, to be absolutely frank. This is every single day. And I'm recognizing that there's a part of this opportunity, or let me say, there's a part of this dilemma that does feel like an opportunity. There is part of this problem that does feel like an opportunity because I recognize the number of ways that I can and have made money since I've been unemployed and the means by which I can capitalize on those type of opportunities in order to keep money, one, coming in, but then two, keep money coming into my life in such a way that I can possibly build something that is strong and has a strong foundation. All that to say is that I was watching a podcast this morning. If you know me, you know I love Eric Thomas and everyone that he's connected to. And one thing they were talking about was playing offense versus playing defense. And they mentioned not just him, but them as well as Jamal and CJ and Carl. They're all talking, discussing how when we're pursuing jobs, we're pursuing paychecks that are steady, that are regular, we're usually on the defense, right? We're trying to get security, we're trying to become safe, we're trying to take care of this particular thing such that we don't have to honestly go out there and take some extra risks and do some more things to make sure that our brand is stronger and so on and so forth. But they also mentioned the importance of pursuing things on the offense. And this starts to really resonate with me because I do know that it's one thing to get a job and to receive a paycheck on a regular basis. And the biggest risks that you have to take are sometimes on the job. But then when you are on the offense, you start to recognize that you have to play and move in such a way as to bring things towards you on a regular basis. Anyone who has played sports or is playing sports, you recognize that if you're going to be on the offense, you're going to take more risks more often. And that's something that I recognize is happening and has been happening since I've been unemployed, is that I'm having to take more risks. I'm having to put myself out there more. I'm having to um, take put myself in more difficult situations on purpose such that I can have more opportunities. All that to say is there's a part of me that is growing, starting to appreciate this opportunity. While it is difficult, while it is emotional, while it is a mental battle, I do recognize that this is an opportunity to possibly take my speaking, my workshops, my financial literacy, poetry, whatever that is, to the next level because I now need to make some money in a way that builds off of my strengths, builds off of the things that I do well, the things that I love to do, the things that I do passionately. And this could be something that brings income on a regular basis. All that to say is for other folks, because I recognize that many of us are struggling with unemployment or underemployment. And so if you also are out there struggling with what you can't do and how many opportunities aren't available to you, continue to think about your gifts, your talents, the things that you've maybe put on the back burner because you had a job, and how you can use that to your advantage because it is something that's in you. It's not just on you. It's not just something that you do on an occasion. These are things that you do regularly anyways. All that to say, It's let's be positive and make the most out of these circumstances, especially if we are finding that finding work is way harder than we thought it was going to be. All right, moving on from there. Another thing that I wanted to discuss was the financial literacy pieces. And one thing that does come up for me is the difference between financial literacy and financial literacy. And so, what's coming up is that when I think about financial literacy, I think about everything about finances. I think about everything from budgeting to saving to investing to where you shop and how often you shop and how much you're putting towards investment. I think about the behaviors and the disciplines, but I also am recognizing that there is this other side to it all, which is the literacy part, which is the APYs, the APRs, the escrow, the right, like the literal, what is the language of finances, right? What is your interest? What is your annual right percentage yield, right? What are these types of things that it's all about terminology? And I'm recognizing that at times we can think about finances in these very one of the other type of terms, right? We think, okay, if I know enough about the knowledge, then I'm financially literate. But we have to recognize that if they aren't married to or accompanied by the behaviors and the thinking and the disciplines, then we're actually probably lacking in our relationship with financial literacy. It makes me think about Christianity, and some people say, like, how are you doing, or what are you doing with your spiritual disciplines? And it's like, well, it's one thing to understand and know about and be able to quote scripture and talk about Bible verses and talk about Bible characters, and that's being literate about what's in the Bible. But it's another thing to have the disciplines down, right? To constantly be in relationship to God, our relationship with prayer, our relationship to worship, our relationship to evangelism, our relationship to worship, missionary work, things like this, right? And so I'm just acknowledging that there are two sides to this coin of financial literacy. It's one thing to know, what is a credit mix, right? What is an authorized user? What is a trade line? But it's another thing to go on a regular basis. I do these things to make sure that my finances are in order. On a regular basis, I check in with these people to make sure that these things are going accordingly, and I make sure to be disciplined when I'm spending and when I'm saving and when I'm investing, right? So I'm just acknowledging that these are two different things, and that I want to make sure that we are addressing them all, but I do acknowledge that there is a certain strength, that there is a certain value in understanding the disciplines versus just the head knowledge, because in the terminology, because the disciplines are what's going to take you from one place to the next. Just understanding what these things mean doesn't mean that you put them into practice. It just means that you know what they mean. How you put these things into practice is going to have a bigger impact on you because of your ability to keep doing these things, sometimes because they're difficult or in spite of how difficult they can be. So that's something that's been on my mind more recently, especially as I start thinking more about investing and how important it is to understand some of these things about investing, how important it is to understand some of the terminology, how important it is to understand what's happening in a business when these different things are happening in the stock market, and understanding why. With that being said, I have been having many thoughts and feelings about the stock market lately because I'm seeing it move in ways that aren't exactly directly just connected to a business's ability to produce profits, but other things, right? So, as you probably have noticed, when it comes to Netflix just put a bid out to purchase Warner Brothers Studio, and it's not all of it, but it's like 2/3, and they are the ones who won out in that bid. And then I think Paramount came out a couple of days ago and made a bigger bid, but they're trying to buy not just the 2/3, but the whole Warner Brothers Studio. And it's starting to show up in the stock market that Netflix is still trending downwards, but Paramount is trending upwards, and so is Warner Brothers. And so it's starting to look like when people are investing, they're not just investing money in order to make money off of their investments. Like what we saw with Cracker Barrel, sometimes people are putting money towards companies or removing money towards companies because they're making statements. And they're not just making statements individually, but they're making statements collectively about what they want to see. And so you start to recognize at some point that the stock market is not simply a matter of understanding the financial literacy and what's going on with the company, right? But it's understanding how the customers, even more importantly, the shareholders, how they feel about the company and what their opinions and beliefs and feelings are, such that you go, I recognize that even though this company is doing well, if they make a statement that upsets their shareholders, they do something that upsets their shareholders, they can find themselves not doing well in the stock market, even though they are delivering good products and profiting every quarter. Hello, right? So you start to recognize that the stock market, by some means, is a market. And because it's a market, you're dealing with a number of people influencing it and in such a way as to point out what they believe, what they feel, what they think is important, and what they want to have happen, regardless of how the company is performing. I first started to recognize this and what's happening with NVIDIA and the Microsofts and everyone else who is using AI, and how, the market had a downturn in the last number of weeks, but it has been coming back. But in the last number of weeks, it has been doing a downturn, even though NVIDIA did well with regard to its profit and its earnings call, right? Even though Microsoft did well in their earnings call, even though Meta did well in their earnings call. Actually, I think Meta didn't do so well, but Google did well in their earnings call. And you start to see that even though those things happen, the market is still going down and trending downward despite all of that. And so it goes interesting. I thought that would mean directly that their shares would be going up because they did well in their earnings call. And again, you're recognizing that fear matters, that information matters, that what's happening, when we look at CNBC and we see other people reporting on different websites, that their opinions matter about the situation, even if those opinions aren't backed by what's happening in the market, that they actually can influence the market, right? So same thing that when we talk about, what the moves that Berkshire Hathaway makes, or the moves that Wells Fargo makes, or the moves that other banks are making. And when they make certain moves, it goes, well, some people are going to follow them simply because it's who is making the move, regardless of whether or not it's founded in truth or it's founded simply in feelings, beliefs, and opinions. And so this is, for me, a wake-up call, right? It's reminding me that this isn't simply about the numbers. It's not simply about the ins and outs of a business. This is also about power, which takes us back to that question that we were talking about with P. Diddy in the very beginning, which is how power has the power to influence people to do things, even if it's not in their best interests. Even when it's not in their best interest, which is wild, because we recognize that a lot of things that are happening in the country right now headed and spearheaded by Donald Trump aren't necessarily positively impacting everybody that voted for him, but because of their feelings, thoughts, and emotions around the person in power, they are willing to deal with some of those things regardless of how it actually makes them feel or impacts their personal lives. Which, again, on the surface of things, it's like, y'all are tripping. That makes no sense. That's idiotic. That's ignorant. On the other hand, we see in very real instances how that plays out almost every day in our personal lives, given how we relate to people in power who are around us, whether we're talking about our managers, our CEOs, our executive directors, right? Our city celebrities, or regional celebrities or national celebrities. Like, we all have these different thoughts and feelings about things that are happening, and we know that we all have to varying degrees, move carefully, because if we say things and do things that don't go in line with the people that support the people that we love, that the people that support the people that we love will turn on us, because we acknowledge that this person didn't say do what they said they were going to do, or they didn't follow through, they didn't back up what they said, they did the opposite, they said the opposite in private, they did the opposite in public, whatever it may be. We recognize that sometimes we have to keep quiet because we don't want to disrupt how other people feel about us, who support the people that we support, who support the things that we support. And so we find ourselves being more quiet than we want to be. We find ourselves being more nice about certain things and dismissive about certain things, because we don't want to disrupt how we are received and how we are treated and how we um, are impacted by the things that we think and feel about the people who are in power, whether we're talking about people again or things, people or businesses, right? People or political parties, right? We're talking about our relationship to power. So all that to say, it's been like I said, a wild last number of weeks. Also, today is literally my birthday. Today's literally my birthday. Y'all won't see this today, and so my birthday would have passed by the time I post this. All that to say is that because it's my birthday, I'm also having a number of feelings. I'm having a number of thoughts. I'm having a number of emotions about my age, not just my age, but also, my employment status, the money, and all these different things. But I will say that there's a lot to be grateful for. There's a lot to be grateful for. In this coming week, I'll be talking at my church, and we'll be reflecting on some of the things that we started doing this year and what we did well this year, right? What we liked about what we accomplished this year. And I have a lot to be grateful for. I honestly do. It's just that there are some things that I'm also struggling with. And so those things are nonetheless hard. But I honestly do. When I started writing some things down at the Oakland's Entrepreneur Retreat last week, I was acknowledging, I got some things going this year that are pretty dope. And I have to be grateful that I got them going this year, because it's going to matter next year. It's going to matter in 2027. It's going to matter in 2028, right? So I'm just acknowledging, like, good things are happening, good things have happened, and good things will continue to happen despite what doesn't happen, if I continue to have a good mindset, positive mindset, and move forward in the things that I'm pursuing and trying to accomplish. I think that's the episode. I don't know if there's a whole lot to talk about more than that. I'm glad that I spoke. I'm glad that I didn't say a whole lot. I honestly just worked on that. I will be talking this Sunday. I will be talking this evening at EOYDC. I'll be posting that next week as well. I will be talking this Sunday at my church. I will be talking at EOC next week. And so I'm looking forward to all those things, working out, the money that comes from it, but also the things that can be built as a result of what I make from these and the relationships that I'm building and working on. So I encourage you guys to stay connected, keep looking out. And if you have an event you want somebody to speak at, whether it's about motivation or it's about financial literacy, anywhere in between those two things, definitely hit me up. And I'm definitely going to continue to post content, whether it's TikTok or it's Facebook or it's Instagram or it's YouTube. And so stay connected and let's continue to prosper, right? Prosper not only physically, not only financially, but also physically, mentally, spiritually, and all that, right? And so let's continue to take that message out there and give that to folks, because we know that they need it and we know that we can use it, right? So I'll talk with y'all soon. Y'all have a great day. Peace.